Let's look at NKBA graphic standards for the mechanical plan. The mechanical plan is where NKBA shows all of the electrical, lighting, and mechanical information, which is plumbing and HVAC. All right. If you are involved in larger projects, you might pull those sets of information onto different sheets. NKBA is typically working with a very small project, and therefore they put all of this information all on one sheet. So what do we show on this mechanical plan, all right, that I've kind of highlighted here? You're going to show walls, doors, and windows. You also show the cabinets, the countertops, the fixtures, and appliances. You're going to show, like I mentioned, all electrical, lighting, plumbing, and HVAC. You also show any ceiling items. They should be dashed, like this example here, in order to coordinate location with lighting. Now, if you have a complicated ceiling, you might do a separate reflected ceiling plan, and that would be totally fine. But if you don't have that, you want to include it here. All right. Things that we don't include, you don't include that cabinet nomenclature, which is nice because it takes a layer of information off of this very crowded plan. Right? But we do label your major and fixtures and appliances, just like we saw on the floor plan. For quick reference, this one says refrigerator. All right, so keep those on the plan. Let's look towards the right-hand side of this page here and look at the mechanical legend. And yes, it is labeled mechanical legend. All right. This is a list, and it should include all symbols used on the plan. So if you've got a symbol over here, it has to be on or in the legend. All right. And it would be best if those symbols are at the same size or scale as on the plan. All right. So if it looks like this over here, it should look like it over there. The mechanical legend includes specifications for lighting and other mechanical equipment, which is typically perhaps some vents or some heating or some ventilation, bathroom vent, excuse me. Let's try that one again. Your mechanical legend is going to include specifications for lighting and other equipment. That other equipment might be some heating equipment if it's included in your project, or ventilation. For a bathroom, it's typically the bathroom vent fan. Right? And similar to what we saw in the floor plan specifications list, you're going to list a short name for the item. All right, then the manufacturer, model number, and all ordering information. So let's take a look over here. We've got this symbol, which is the same, same size, same symbol as is used in the plan. It says 4-inch recessed LED lights. That's the nickname or short name for this item. We've got brand ABC. It's the manufacturer, and then we've got model 123. And if there was any other information needed to successfully order this item, you would include it right here. All right. Now, for the electrical, you also include electrical switches and receptacles. Receptacles, by the way, that's the fancy name for electrical outlets. And for student projects, we're going to use a descriptive specification. I don't need you to go pick a specific manufacturer or model number for your switches and outlets. You can if you want to go to that extra step, that's great, but you don't have to. So an example would be a GFCI outlet, and you could just list it like that. Or a 3-way switch with dimmer. You could just list it like that. You don't have to go on and tell us that it's a Lutron model number or whatever. All right. So that's listed over here. All right. And there's one more piece of information that is needed on this plan. We need to know the height of switches and receptacles. And that's typically done with a note. And here's an example here. It says, all switches and receptacles 48 inches above finished floor unless otherwise noted. This is kind of a typical note, says all of them are that height, unless they're noted. So then you go through your drawing and find anything that's not at that height and put the height on the plan. And so here's an example right here. This outlet is at 37 inches above the finished floor, not 48. And so we need to note that. The other way to do it, if you've got outlets and switches at various heights and it doesn't make sense to use this typical note, is simply to tag every outlet and switch with their height. Next, let's talk about those dedicated outlets for your appliances. The fixtures and appliances themselves are specified on the floor plan, so we don't need to repeat that information here on the mechanical legend. So in the example that we're seeing here, the range and the hood themselves are specified on the floor plan. All right. What are we specifying on the mechanical plan? Well, we're looking at the utilities to service these fixtures and appliances. And so here's an example, something that I think is incorrect in your sample set, and here's a better way. We're going to show for this vent hood, we're going to show the dedicated outlets, all right, and we're not going to list the actual specification of that vent hood. That information's already in the set. We don't need to repeat it. All right. So instead, you could use language such as dedicated outlet for vent hood, 120 volts. All right. And the symbol, NKBA's symbol for dedicated outlet is this little triangle within a circle, all right, with a text tag that is specific to the item that we are servicing. While I'm here and looking at this text tag, I'd like to remind you to use a minimum of 1/8 inch high text. Sometimes these little tags can get really small. Make sure they're big enough to read. All right, let's talk about dimensions specifically for mechanical plans. We are going to use a center line dimension for all light fixtures and equipment. All right, those all get a center line. For wall-mounted lighting and equipment, this is pretty easy. The centerline dimension goes along the wall. And so we've got an example. Is there an example in this set? No, that's why I didn't tag it. All right. For anything that's kind of floating in the room, we need to centerline dimension it, but they get two. They get centerline dimensions in two directions, measured from the walls. And I like to think about this very much like I just mentioned with the islands in the floor plan. I like to think about this as kind of a Cartesian coordinate. We need to locate that piece of equipment kind of in the X and Y direction. And sorry, let me go ahead and start this over again. And very similar to, like I mentioned with islands in the floor plan, I like to think about these dimensions as a Cartesian coordinate system with the X direction and the Y direction. So we need to locate that piece of equipment, this little light, all right, kind of in the X direction and the Y direction. That's why it needs two dimensions. Okay, so here's an example right here. All right, notice it's dimensioned from the wall to here, and here is our other dimension in the other direction, dimensioned from the wall to that item. Okay. Now, LED strip lighting is a special case. It's not typically dimensioned. And so it's shown with respect to its location on the plan. And you might choose to include a note about its installation. So if you want it to be installed 1 inch back from the front edge of the upper cabinet or something like that, go ahead and note it right here in the legend. Now, notice we've been talking about light fixtures and equipment. You don't need to dimension switches or receptacles. They don't get dimensions at all. And the reason for this is that they are typically placed in the field based on where the framing is in the wall behind. And so that is adjusted and decided upon in the fields, and we don't dimension that. So notice this switch, no dimension at all. Let's move on to talk about lighting circuits. Lights are connected to their controls, their switches, using circuit arcs. And here we have an example here. Here's a switch and a circuit arc connecting, here, here, here. And in this case, because it is a three-way switch, we've got a connection to the other switch over here. Okay. Now, NKBA graphic standards specify a solid line type for the circuit arcs. AIA uses dashed lines. Chief Architect specifically will default to dashed lines unless you go change that. This example set is showing dashed lines. In my class, I will accept either, right? But just know that submitting to, for example, let me try that again. In my class, I will accept either solid or dashed. If you're submitting to that national competition, you should probably go with the NKBA graphic standards of solid lines. There is a lot to know about how to draw these lighting circuits. So let's point out some common errors. First of all, the circuit arcs, we're talking about the curved line, right? They need to connect to the end point of switch symbols. So here is a mistake right here. It's just kind of floating next to that switch. Instead, I want this line to connect right here to this point. Number two, circuit arcs should never cross a wall. All right, so we've got one right here. Go around instead. Don't ever cross a wall. And just as we're looking at number two, this we shouldn't connect to the back edge of the switch symbol, right? You should definitely connect right here to this point. Error number three, this is really common in especially kitchen plans. Don't allow your circuit arcs to touch any symbol that the circuit doesn't control. All right, so I said no right here. What this indicates, if you have a switch and it touches the outlet, it means that that switch controls the outlet. That's a switched outlet. All right, so don't say that if you don't mean it. Number four, try not to allow circuit arcs to cross. The goal is legibility. We should be able to really quickly and easily tell which lights connect to which controls. So I've got an example here. This is honestly, this is not too bad because it's pretty easy to tell how these cross. In some other examples, it's very difficult, but typically we don't want them to cross. All right, if you have to have them cross because your plan is complicated and sometimes there's just no way to draw it without crossing your circuit arcs, you should use what I call a hop symbol. So in this case, I've said yes right here. We've got this circuit arc and then we've drawn this one. It comes here, it breaks, and we use a hop. We jump over and then connect. This is a visual indication. It honestly helps your eye follow the correct line, and it's easier to tell which circuit goes to which switch. Finally, check for legibility. Can you actually read all tags, or are they kind of covered up? All right. Are they actually the minimum 1/8 inch text size, or did that get shrunken down? Right. A lot of students struggle with the fact that a bank of switches like this is going to be larger graphically on the page than it is physically in your building. All right. That's accepted, that's known in the industry. You can go ahead and show those as wide as you like, and we understand that they are installed in one place. Thanks everyone. In this video, we just took a look at the NKBA graphic standards for the mechanical plan.